All right, so diving into the world of Britney Spears, but this isn't going to be just the typical rewind, you know? You guys have sent in a ton of articles, trivia, even some like deep cuts, and we are so ready to unpack it all. From pop princess to like full-blown cultural icon, get ready to see Britney in a whole new light.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how much there is to unpack. You've given us this stuff to really dive into how her career kind of bumped up against the whole evolution of pop music. We're talking late 90s, right? So it's like MTV was king. The internet was just finding its feet. It was a wild time for someone like Britney to just explode onto the scene.
And talk about perfect timing. It wasn't just luck, though, right? This was a whole cultural moment waiting to happen. One of the sources even said her first single, you know it, Baby One More Time, it sold over 10 million copies. That's not just like success, that's changing the game completely.
And we can't forget that music video. I mean, the whole schoolgirl thing, the dancing,
Right.
it definitely started a conversation,
Yeah.
right, about being innocent but also kind of rebellious,
Yeah.
especially for girls at the time. It wasn't just catchy. It was tapping into something bigger that was already out there.
It's a wild, right? And speaking of which, I read somewhere that the music video almost got totally scrapped. Imagine that world, like pop culture, without that iconic look. What do you think? What made music videos back then so powerful?
Well, MTV was like this nonstop visual explosion, right? Images and sounds everywhere all the time. It wasn't enough to just have the song anymore. You had to have a whole visual story that grabbed people. And Britney, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but she got that. The schoolgirl look, the dancing, it all built on itself to be something way bigger.
And those dance routines. Man, I was trying to learn those moves back in the day. Pretty sure I wasn't alone there. It really felt like her music became this like universal language, something everyone could connect with. Did you get that feeling too?
Totally. One of the sources called it a shared language for a generation. But it was more than just the music, wasn't it? Her style, the crop tops, those low-rise jeans that just screamed late 90s. It's interesting how those things all get linked together, you know?
Like she wasn't just singing, she was creating a whole look, a whole vibe. And there's this one source that talks about how big of an influence, like powerful women like Janet Jackson and Madonna were on her. You can see it too, those threads of strong women making art, pushing boundaries, owning their sexuality. It's a clear connection.
Yeah, the powerful line to be part of. These women, they weren't just making music. They were going up against what people expected and changing the whole pop music world because of it. And it's important to remember, the 90s, they weren't always a smooth ride. For Britney or for the music industry in general, this is where her story really starts to go in a new direction, you know, beyond just the music and into, new territory.
You were saying how things weren't always easy. And yeah, you're right. One source really dug into all of Britney's later struggles, especially the whole conservatorship thing. It felt like the entire world was watching it all go down, trying to figure out what it all meant.
It definitely became this turning point, not just for her, but for how we see fame, you know, and all the complicated stuff that comes with it. I mean, here's someone who was like the definition of a pop star for years.
Yeah.
And then to see that challenge so publicly with real struggles,
Yeah.
it made everyone face some tough realities.
No doubt. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was about mental health, about someone being in control of their own life, the crazy pressure on people in the spotlight, especially like women in that industry. Didn't one source say the conservatorship kind of blew up the conversation about all that?
It totally did. It made us all think about how we treat celebrities, right? The lack of privacy, the constant judging, especially now with social media. And remember, this was when the internet and like tabloid news were really starting to become the same thing.
Yeah, it's like everything got amplified like 1,000%. You couldn't look away. And one source made this point that as extreme as Britney's situation was, it showed the human cost of fame in a way we hadn't really dealt with before.
Right. It forced us to look past the image, past the music, and see a real person there. It made us ask, what's our responsibility as fans, as people consuming all this media?
Yeah.
How do we balance being interested in celebrities with, you know, actually having empathy and respect?
That's something we're still figuring out, and it makes you wonder how different things might have been if social media had been around back in the 90s. But hey, let's lighten the mood for a sec, because in the middle of all this serious stuff, there's some seriously awesome trivia we got to get to. Ready for this? Britney Spears was on the Mickey Mouse Club.
Oh, totally. Talk about a launching pad, right? I mean, Justin Timberlake, Christina Aguilera. The amount of talent on that show is mind-blowing. It makes you think about how those early days shaped everything that came after.
It's like a pop culture time capsule. Okay, get this. The Baby One More Time Video almost didn't happen. Apparently, there were some, shall we say, creative differences. Can you imagine?
I read that. Crazy, right? Such a huge moment in pop culture history almost never happened. It really makes you think about what other big moments almost got left behind. Yeah.
For real. Okay, one last bit of trivia. Her signature breathy singing style. Totally inspired by Janet Jackson.
Oh, for sure. You can hear it. It shows how much artists, even the huge ones, are inspired by each other, building on what came before. It reminds us that they were all fans once, too.
Makes you think about the music differently when you know where it came from, you know? And talk about inspiration. The Toxic music video. Did you know Wade Robson choreographed that?
Yeah. He's a legend, right? Worked with, like, everyone. Shows you the level of talent Britney had around her, even for something like a music video, which is already a team effort.
It's crazy how these little things add so much to her story. Man, we've gone deep today. Her rise to fame, how she changed the 90s, the good times, the bad times, the music, the whole persona. When you put it all together, what's the biggest takeaway for you?
That's a good question. I think it's that even though Britney's story is huge, it's also something we can all relate to in a way. She had to deal with all the good and bad of fame, like on a global scale, right?
Yep.
And the things she went through, the ups and downs, they meant something to people way beyond the music world.
Totally. It's like we all watched her grow up as a performer and just as a person. She became this symbol of the 90s, and what she's been through still makes us talk about mental health, about having control over your own life, about what fame can cost you.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes you think, when we're all into some pop culture thing, how can we be into it in a way that sees both the art and the human being behind it?
Finding that balance, right? Loving the music, the talent, but remembering there's a real person living their life behind the scenes. So from teen idol to like this massive cultural figure, Britney Spears' story shows you how powerful music can be, how complicated fame is, and how important it is to be kind, especially in a world obsessed with celebrities. It's a story that's still going, and it reminds us that the best stories are the ones you can't really put in a box.